Camas, home of 90% of the citizens saying we're not paying outrageous taxes for things that don't work. And that message was heard throughout the entire state. As Representative Vick talked about, the last 3 sessions of the state legislature focused on fixing education funding via the McCleary decision. The citizens of our state were promised a local property tax cut as part of that solution. And now that local property tax cut appears to have vanished. As one of the creators of the McCleary fix, I would welcome your input on when are we going to get our property tax relief locally.
So you received cuts on both your winter and fall taxes this year. What happened was when we struck that bargain, the Republicans were in the majority coalition caucus. And we were needed in order to get a budget. So we held out for a property tax cut for our people. When the Democrats took control of the Senate, they then had 3 houses. They had the House of Representatives, they had the Senate, and of course, they had the governor's mansion. So when they did that, they erased not only the agreement on the tax cuts, they erased about 90% of the entire McCleary bill, which is why in the next 3 years we will be back into a McCleary-like situation, because they didn't want to do the things that we needed to do to make sure that we could have a sustainably funded education system. For example, we put in $11 billion more into the education system with the caveat that there could be no that contracts that were not up could not be opened and negotiated. Therefore, all the programmatic money would go into the program. And I'm thinking specifically career and technical education and special education were the 2 that I bird dogged. The follow-on to 2242 erased all of that, and so all the contracts immediately came open, and I was quoted in the newspaper as saying it was like dragging a donut through a fat farm. Everyone saw the money and jumped in and wanted their piece, and so we saw these amazing spikes across the state in teacher pay. Not that teachers are not worth it. I was a teacher, I know how hard it is, but the original approach of 2242 had a ramp up that would have made sense, but they wanted it all, and I'm not talking about the teachers, I'm talking about the union. They wanted it all, they wanted it now, and they took it. So we are almost all, I think there's only 1 or 2 provisions left. One is the 4-year balanced budget outlook for school districts, but even OSPI, Chris Reichdahl is saying, yeah, he doesn't really care about it, so report if you're in balance or not, he doesn't care. So that's what happened. We did the very best we could to solve a really crummy situation, and politics being, elections have consequences, John, you know that. So we did the very best we could. We drove reforms that would have been good had they been able to be carried through, but they weren't. And so that's the situation that we are currently in. I'm most sensitive to Camas because the most seniors lost their homes in Camas, in my district. It was the seniors who lost their homes because they can no longer afford to pay the taxes. So it's not surprising to me that the pool went down, because it's not really, education is a priority. We need to educate our kids. A pool, not so much.
I will say I think there's room for hope on this one too, because we keep talking about affordable housing, and as I mentioned earlier, this next session's probably mental health and affordable housing, or housing in general. And I think there is a real realization that property taxes are becoming more and more of a hindrance to home ownership, even to renting. As Ann mentioned, seniors, especially those living off of Social Security, are getting dinged the hardest and suffering the most consequences. And while our property taxes are very high in Clark County, you can't imagine what they're paying in Seattle. This is a bipartisan issue, I tell you what. When your property tax bill is $12,000 in Seattle, your you're starting to ask what's going on. And so I think it's an issue that, I don't wanna look at you and say we're gonna, come together, kumbaya, lower your property taxes by half next year. But I do think it's something that is more on the radar than it ever has been. McCleary was not perfect, but I think we were all very happy with a nice negotiated package. And again, a year later, when that negotiation, gets gone back on, that's a tough thing to swallow. But we get to look for the next option and the next opportunity, and I think that's what we're doing. There are discussions though, and I don't want to, some things are Republican versus Democrat, some things aren't. I don't think this is one that you can draw a clear party line. You can pick people from a party, but I don't think, you can draw a unanimous conclusion there. So it is impactful, and it's something that, when you have the amount of people losing their homes as they are, there's the old adage that one is too many, but really, we're talking about almost a crisis.
Yeah.
Almost a crisis.
What are the numbers?